Okay, welcome everyone. It looks like many of the attendees have joined, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you so much for joining today's webinar, Salesforce1 Mobile for Nonprofits. My name is Kirsten Kippen. I'm the Marketing Manager with Idealist Consulting, and we are thrilled to have you here today. Idealist Consulting is based in Portland, Oregon, for those who don't know, and we are dedicated to providing nonprofits, private sector, and government with advanced technical solutions that help them run more effectively. We're also a certified B Corp and one of the top-rated consulting firms on the Salesforce AppExchange with over 700 Salesforce implementations, including a Salesforce1 application that we are deploying right now for Sacramento Tree Foundation. So before we dig in, just a few housekeeping notes. You are all muted in order to improve audio quality for everyone. So please use the questions panel on the sidebar, the GoToWebinar sidebar, if you want to ask questions throughout, and we will address them publicly at the end of the webinar. And also, we will be sending the slide deck and recordings after the webinar to all registrants. So you can watch the recording later if you missed any points or if you want to share that with your colleagues. So with that, I will introduce our presenters today. First off, we have Colleen. I'm thrilled to have her here. She is the Sacramento Shade Director for Sacramento Tree Foundation. Callista is the Idealist Consulting Project Manager on the Salesforce1 deployment that we're doing with Sacramento Tree Foundation right now. And Rob is Idealist Consulting's CEO and founder. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Rob.
Thank you, Kirsten. I had my phone on mute there, gangs. Apologize about that. So what is Salesforce1? And that has been a general question that's come from the community. We all get an idea. Obviously, it's designed to leverage mobile. But really, what does it mean for nonprofits in particular? For those who went to Dreamforce, you probably heard Mark Benioff referencing Salesforce1 repeatedly. And there were some references to the nonprofit space and how it could be leveraged. But it was in general passing, and although it drummed up a lot of excitement, there were still a lot of questions after Dreamforce on what Salesforce1 actually was. Recently, David Manelsky of the foundation had posted a survey on the Hub. And for folks who are not familiar with the Hub, I strongly recommend you check it out. There's a lot of great information on there. But the general question was, what is Salesforce1? Is it a mobile app for iOS and Android devices, a robust set of APIs for developing mobile applications, a new user interface optimized for mobile, a mobile application platform? Various people answered that survey, and probably no surprise that it's really all of the above. A lot of folks that approach us for mobile development primarily focus on number 3, a new user interface optimized for mobile, but it does entail a lot more than that. So what does that really mean for you guys? And what is the value of adopting a mobile platform? Now, for those of you who are not familiar with this, I do consulting for investment firms. And one of the things that comes up repeatedly is cloud computing and mobile. A lot of folks that aren't prepared for the mobile tide that's coming in are going to find themselves in a very challenging position, probably in the next 2 to 3 years if they don't get on board. What I'm speaking to specifically is that PC sales have declined considerably over the course of the last 3 years, about 8.6% decline, while tablets, mobile devices have increased by almost 53%. This has been impacted even further by a recent purchase or attempt to purchase by a company called Blackstone Group by Dell, of Dell, excuse me, and they basically said, we're not interested in purchasing Dell at this point, largely because we're seeing this unprecedented decline, what the Wall Street Journal referred to as a free fall in PC purchases. Okay? There's clearly a trend moving over into mobile. In addition to that, we can see the writing on the wall with things like Windows 8 which, although most of you who have used Windows 8, believe it or not, it's not just to make our lives more difficult. It was intended to actually help us adopt things like a tablet and mobile devices. So that said, how can we expect to use something like Salesforce1? There's a lot of different ways to leverage a mobile device in the nonprofit space. So some general examples, and we're putting these out here as examples to get folks thinking. We're really on the cusp here, and there's going to be a lot of creative ideas that come out from the space. But here's some things that have sort of revealed themselves as to be obvious applications of Salesforce1. One example would be case management. So when you're in a situation where you might be interacting with your constituency in the field, could be conducting onboarding or follow-up interviews where that person is most comfortable. So you might be a hospital bed, for example, or in their home, where you would have a tablet and you'd be able to take information from your client and then be able to put that information directly into the tablet. So this is a direct relationship now that you're able to gather information and have that information flow directly into your database of choice, in this case, Salesforce. Another example would be knowledge and data access. Incidentally, you have this ability right now if you're leveraging Salesforce. It is mobile ready. You can log on to your phone right now, and the interface all adjusts accordingly to whatever mobile device you're leveraging. But an example of that would be, let's say you're at a dinner and a major gift officer, and you're going to lunch with a major donor, and you want to review all the communications with that donor in the last 6 months and get information about that donor. You can have that readily accessible without dragging around your PC. Now, this may be obvious to some of you, but a lot of folks don't even realize that they can access Salesforce and all the information that they've been tracking right from their mobile device. So knowledge and data access is something you can do right away with Salesforce1. Another is fundraising and online donations. Now, this one is probably going to be the most impactful as Salesforce1 emerges. And what I mean by that is that you've got a lot of folks now that don't even leverage their PC on a regular basis. The Y generation, for example, primarily uses mobile devices in their day-to-day interaction. That being said, if you want them to be making donations on the behalf of your mission, they're likely going to want to pull out their phone and make that donation right on their phone. Now, a lot of websites are mobile ready, but there are a lot of sites that are not. So that's something that's very likely you're going to see in the near future. And then again, on-site data collection. Field staff recording data about a number of applications of energy-saving procedures in place in order to calculate a customer's projected energy savings, or, for example, recommended and record tree planting locations, as Sacramento Tree Foundation is doing with the mobile app that we are working on together. And that's one of the things that we're going to speak to today. And this particular project is just a lot of fun because it integrates mapping and also signature capability. And that was one reason why we wanted to show you this, because it is such a dynamic deployment of Salesforce1. So that said, I'd like to hand it over to Colleen to speak just briefly about Sacramento Tree Foundation.
Thanks so much, Rob. Appreciate it. Our goal at the Sacramento Tree Foundation is to teach people about the value and importance of trees and the vital role trees play in terms of environmental, economic, and public health benefits. One of the many ways we do this is to provide expert advice about tree placement and species choice so that we can maximize shade on buildings, reduce the urban heat island effect, and capitalize on all the benefits of trees. Since the Sacramento region has more than 7 million trees, caring for this canopy is a huge responsibility that requires the support of all our region's citizens. This urban tree canopy, unlike most others throughout the U.S., was hand-planted and grown by the earliest of our settlers. Because our hot summer climate is not conducive for trees, careful attention and care must be provided so that we can protect and expand this canopy for future generations. This means the Sacramento Tree Foundation must inspire, teach, and activate our region's 1.5 million residents to take ownership of this tremendous resource. Finding funding to support these kinds of activities in urban forestry is a challenge. And one way groups like ours can acquire funding is by monetizing the energy, carbon, water, and air quality benefits of trees. We can't do this unless we are able to map, monitor, quantify, and report on all the trees planted in the urban area. This is a really challenging opportunity. Thanks to a grant funded by CAL FIRE, the Sacramento Tree Foundation, and Idealist Consulting are using Salesforce1 to create a CRM integrated mobile mapping app that will allow the tracking of ecosystem service benefits tree by tree via field monitoring and/or remote sensing technology. And we're so thankful to have Idealist helping us through this. It's been great working with Callista.
All right. Thank you so much, Colleen. So with that, we are going to turn it over to Callista to dive into some more details on this project.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Welcome, and we're glad to have you here. And as Rob said, this has been a really exciting and fun project to work on, and Colleen's been a great partner in that. So, Colleen, thanks for providing that perspective on your organization. I think that's always very helpful to kind of set up the project before we start digging into the details. So I'm going to attempt to do the same thing, and then we'll get right into a walkthrough of the application. What I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about first was the general project scope, because this is one of these questions that I always have when I sit in any of these demos, is we kind of look at a whole bunch of really cool technology, and then at the very end somebody raises their hand and says, well, how many hours did that project take? Or, you know, what exactly was the scope here? And it kind of blows me away. So I wanted to do that first and kind of set some parameters around what this project entailed. But I don't mean this to be in any way sort of like a limiting factor for what Salesforce1 application development is capable of, because it can be many different things and many different scales and take many different shapes and forms. So we'll kind of talk about some of that. But first, let's talk about the technology that we used in this project. So the mobile app we're going to look at today is built on the Salesforce1 platform. It does leverage custom Visual Force pages, a custom Google Maps integration, which we use the Google Maps API for. And we are also leveraging a DocuSign for Salesforce application in this app, which we'll also take a look at. Our team on this project was fairly small. It's primarily myself as the project manager, and then one of our senior developers at Idealist Consulting, who's a very skilled architect, Visual Force and Apex developer, and also really experienced building custom integrations like the one that we needed for this Google Maps integration. We had a terrific partner in Sacramento Tree Foundation, and Colleen in particular. She was super clear with her requirements and communications, really responsive and helpful with her feedback. And she shouldered the majority of the user acceptance testing, or UAT, along with her team. And I do want to just point out two things on that point that I want to dig into a little bit, and maybe they're obvious for those of you who've done projects of this scope before or just worked with as a consultant in general. The first is that good communication and clear requirements from the outset can save enormous amounts of time and money. So do your homework up front. Spend the time that you need to plan the application. It will really help you in your development process. I guess that doesn't really just apply just to mobile projects in general, but it could be applied to really any technology project. And then the second point that I want to make, and this is specific to mobile app development, and that is that the client should expect to be heavily engaged in the testing and the user acceptance testing. Mobile apps really need to be tested in the field by the users who are going to understand the business processes. As consultants, we can design and we can test and we can build to your specs, but we really don't know how it's going to really function in the field until you get your users' hands on it, and that's where we really see where the rubber meets the road. So there's kind of two pieces to that. One is that you should expect to be involved in that, and second is it can reduce some of the project costs if you're willing to shoulder that burden, and ultimately you'll get a better result. So that's really kind of nice to note. As far as project methodology, we employed an agile project management methodology on this project, as we do on most of our projects. It was particularly well suited for this deployment. particularly because we were working with a short project timeline, and also because we were working with Salesforce1, which is a really emerging and developing technology. So Agile was a great choice from both of those perspectives, and it allowed for rapid iterations and expedited development. And we were able to meet the required client and funder launch schedule on this project. Finally, the big question, how much did it cost and how long did it take? The project from start to finish took roughly 4 months, and it was approximately 400 hours. And again, I just want to put a big asterisk on that and say, I don't think that that's necessarily typical of the Salesforce1 deployment. It's important to note that this project had some very specific requirements related to geolocation, mapping of tree sites, this custom visual force that I mentioned. That really represented the bulk of the project hours. So the scope of a Salesforce1 deployment is really going to vary based on your organization's needs and how much customization or how little customization that you want. Okay, let's get to it. All right. So what I'd like to do now is give you a walkthrough, essentially a day in the life of this application and how this application is used. We're going to start by looking at the desktop UI, and we're going to be using screenshots for this because it's difficult, as much as I love live demos, it's difficult to show you, because this is a mobile app that's used in the field of geolocation, to show you how it would really work with screenshots that I'm taking, or that I could be showing you from my my desktop computer. So forgive the screenshots. I'll kind of try and talk you through this without hopefully compromising too much of the functionality of this application. So the first thing that we're looking at is what is the back end of the application. This is what the Sacramento Tree Foundation office staff see. They typically identify prospective customers. These are people that are interested in planting trees on their property, and they schedule location visits for their field staff. And I want to just point out a couple of custom objects so that then when we look at the mobile interface, you can see what we're looking at there. So they're using the nonprofit starter pack, and then they have added some custom objects. We're looking at the tree location object. You also see the tabs to the right of that are tree species and then trees and neighbor shadings. The two custom objects we'll be mostly looking at through the mobile app are the tree locations and the tree species. I'm sorry, the tree locations and the trees. Tree species is a lookup to just reference types of tree species. So a tree location record essentially represents a property, and it is related to a contact object, and then there are tree records associated with it. All right, let's take a look at the next slide. All right, now we're going to jump into looking at the mobile interface. We're looking at it from the point of view of one of the Sacramento Tree Foundation field staff. They are also known as foresters. This is a screenshot of what a forester might see when they logged into Salesforce1 on their iPad at the beginning of their workday. They'd see a list of tasks showing their scheduled tree location visits for the day, and you can see there's 3 here. And these are tasks in Salesforce, and they can be flagged as important or not, and they reference the site location. You can see the address just below the site visit thing. All right, let's move to the next slide. Thank you. All right, so once they get on site at a tree location or property, they can click into the tree location record from one of the tasks in their task list to review and confirm the contact and location details. And you can see here that this is the tree location record that we also saw in the back end or in the desktop version of Salesforce. And you'll see that they have all the same button options. They have edit, they have clone, they have review map, which is a custom button. So they're all the same buttons that they would have in the desktop interface. They also see all the same set of fields. If you scroll to the right, so if you see the 3 buttons at the top here on this app, this would be if you were swiping to the right. And we'll go to the next slide and see what that looks like. Okay, so this is the detail level view of that page layout. This shows at the bottom all of the related lists that you would see from the tree location record. And then at the top, you'll see a custom Visualforce page. This is the displaying of the Google map that we built custom through the Google API integration. This map looks a little small in this view, but if you're using this app and you click on the map, we'll go to the next page. And this is what the map looks like. And imagine that you're using, the foresters are using iPads, so it's a little bit bigger than this, a little bit more easy to see, and they can move around. The maps that we're displaying can be displayed in either a map view, which we saw in the previous slide, or a satellite view, which is what we're looking at here based on their preference or the particular property that they're working on. And I want to just point out a couple of the pieces of functionality on here. You'll notice the buttons at the top. The Find Me button is a geolocation capability, so that if the forester was walking around on the property, you would click Find Me to kind of show this red pin where they were. You can also show trees if you have visited this property before and trees have been planted on this property before. If you click Show Trees and there were trees that had been previously sited or planted, they would show up as green pins on this map. And then finally, you can click the Plant a Tree button, and that will drop a new pin where you have geolocated yourself. So it basically creates another pin. You can drag it to a different location if it's just a few feet off, or if you're standing in a place where you can't actually stand right where the tree is going to be sited. So let's move on to the next slide. So after or during the walkthrough, as the forester is walking around the site with the homeowner or property owner, and they're dropping these pins on the maps, when they drop the pin and then click on it, they can actually enter the details of the tree that they're going to recommend to be planted at that site. So they can do this actually as they're walking around, or if they want to just drop the pins and then maybe sit down on the porch afterwards to kind of talk it through with the homeowner, they can do that there too, entering any of the details that they wanted to about this tree. And you can see some of the fields that Sacramento Tree Foundation is capturing. The most basic information is just what tree species are you recommending, and then they also capture some detail about the orientation at the site, and is it a community shade tree, like does it shade other properties and things like that. Now, it may be obvious to many of you, but it's worth noting that all of the updates made and the information captured during the site visit and tree sighting is updated in real time in Sacramento Tree Foundation's Salesforce.com instance. So as soon as we save this record, it's in the Salesforce database. Somebody who, a supervisor or somebody who is monitoring this, could actually see these tree records being created in real time and see them showing up on the maps in the back end or in the desktop version of their Salesforce database. So let's move to the next slide. Okay, so here's the DocuSign integration piece. So once they have walked the property and they've selected all their tree sites and they've determined which varieties of trees they're going to recommend to be planted there, they need the person who is the homeowner or the person who's renting the property to sign off on a tree care agreement, because Sacramento Tree Foundation is going to not only tell them where they're going to plant their trees, they're actually going to give them trees to plant there. And it's a significant investment, and so they want the homeowner to sign off on, yes, I will plant these trees where we recommend them, and we'll take care of them to the best of my ability as long as I live at this property. So DocuSign is a very cool application. Some of you may have worked with it before with Salesforce, and they're one of the forerunners in terms of developing apps for Salesforce1. The way that this is accessed is the DocuSign, it's called the little button here is added to the contact page layout. And you can see in the bottom of the contact page layout this little blue plus sign. The plus sign allows you to create and access publisher actions. And this is a new, sort of a new terminology that is used with Salesforce1. These are they can be apps that you add in, they can be customized and created by you to kind of create frequently used tasks or functionality that you think that your users might often need in the field. So from the contact record, you click on this little plus sign. You can see on the right-hand side what pops up, and you see the DocuSign icon. You can also have multiple here, but In this case, we're just displaying this particular one. Once you click on that, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So you get the DocuSign interface, and you can see the documents that you can choose from for signing at the top. You can see that I've selected the tree care agreement, and then you can select who the signer is. And then you can choose this with the radio button to the right of the signer's name, whether you're going to have them, you're going to send it via email and have them sign it via email, or you can sign it in person. In this case, I've selected sign in person, and then you would click just that DocuSign button at the bottom. And we'll move to the next slide to see what that looks like. This is the tree care agreement. You can see at the bottom of the page the sign here. And the person can actually sign it with their finger right there on the iPad and submit it. It will email a copy of that document to the email addresses associated with that contact record. It will also store a copy of that signed document with the contact record in Salesforce. So it's a really nice integration, and it works really smoothly. So let's take a look at just a couple additional pieces of functionality. This is now outside of the DocuSign functionality. Once the document is signed and all the trees are cited, you can either from the mobile app or also from the desktop application, this might be something that would be done back at the office after a supervisor had reviewed the tree sightings. They can actually generate this map, an image like this. You can see the list at the bottom of the trees that have been selected. You can see tree A is a red maple here and some details above it. And then you see the send email button at the bottom. That will actually send a copy of this to the homeowner, because they not only have, these markings where they're supposed to be planting the trees, but they have the map as a reference. And this document is also attached to the contact and the tree location record in Salesforce. Okay. All right, so what's the end result? The end result is the homeowner gets the trees delivered to their location. We have lots of beautiful trees planted all over Sacramento. And then the other result, of course, is that Sacramento Tree Foundation has all of this great data that they've collected and they can use for their analytics. So the next slide just shows a quick peek at some of their dashboards, so they can have that. They can retain the history of their trees planted, they can see trends, they can see species, and they maintain all their customer details in their Salesforce.com database for reporting and future follow-up.
All right, thank you so much, Callista.
Okay, so with that, I think we're going to move into some, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so like you said, we are ready for questions. So again, we're accepting questions on the project in particular about Sacramento Tree Foundation for either Callista or Colleen. And then also we are happy to answer your questions about Salesforce1 in general, how it can be used for different sorts of organizations or anything else that is on your mind as you've been kind of hearing some of the buzz building over the last few months about Salesforce1. So, so again, please feel free to ask questions through that sidebar here, and maybe we'll get it started with just some kind of high-level questions. So, Rob or Callista, this is probably for you. But do all of the apps on the AppExchange work with Salesforce1? Maybe I'll give that to you, Rob. He might be on mute.
Sorry, my mute was on again. I'm saying all these interesting things and no one's hearing them. Anyhow, there are some apps that are configured for Salesforce1 at the moment. There's if you look at the AppExchange in its entirety, roughly 2,000 applications, I think, or thereabouts. It's a very small percentage of those. However, I can assure everybody on this call that that is going to change drastically over the course of 2014. There is a location on the AppExchange that will specify which applications are actually Salesforce1 ready. It's important to note that just because they are on that list doesn't necessarily mean, or I'm sorry, just because they are not on that list doesn't necessarily mean that they are not Salesforce1 ready. And I don't know if you have that list handy or if you can look that up, Kirsten, but
yeah, we had that in resources here, which we're going to go into in a second, but I'll show it to people since we're on that topic. So you can see right here, there's when you go to the AppExchange, there's a lot of different filters and collections and categories that you can go to. And so one of the drop downs under collections is Salesforce1 Ready. And so as Rob was saying, there's only, I think, something like 33 here right now. But you can see one of the most popular ones is DocuSign, which Callista was just showing for this application. And then, yeah, lots of other additions here, and this will only grow in the coming months.
good question.
All right. And here's another one. Can I use Salesforce1 in my existing Salesforce instance?
I'll take that one, Kirsten.
Sure.
So the answer is yes, you can. You can start using Salesforce1 today. All you need to do is log in through your mobile device. You kind of have two different flavors of it. You can use the downloadable app, which you can get from the AppExchange stores for your mobile device, or you can use a web browser. Either way will work. There's some subtle differences between whether you're using the downloadable app or the web browser version. They're both using the Salesforce1 UI. The only kind of real noticeable difference comes through the notifications. If you're using the downloadable app, you can get push notifications because you're already tied in with your mobile device. If you're just using the web browser version, you're just going to get the in-app notifications like you would see if you went to your home page and saw your tasks there.
Great question, and thank you, Callista. And here's one from Cheryl asking if Salesforce1 is appropriate for event management. That's a great question. And
I can speak to that briefly.
Yeah, go for it.
So, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I can speak I'm going to have to get in a little plug here, but I think it's important. Actually, Kirsten, you might be able to speak to this too, just being on the ground. As some of you know, we have a pretty popular party that we hold for nonprofit organizations, both at Dreamforce and at N10, called the MPO Engagement Party. And we leverage technology, third-party solution that integrates with Salesforce called Eventbrite. And that actually has mobile capability for us to check folks in at the door, get information, get them to sign up RSVP at the conference. And it makes our lives a lot easier to facilitate the party. Kirsten, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but
yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone on the call
mobile,
was at NCC recently. Just a couple weeks ago, we hosted this party, but it really made a huge difference. I only brought an iPad to the conference, and I alternated between that and a phone to check people in ahead of time through Eventbrite so that we wouldn't have a long line at the door. And so then we just gave wristbands, and then at the door we were able to check people in as well. And it works, both online and offline, so you don't have to worry about shady Wi-Fi connections and whatnot. It was really quite easy.
I should also probably mention that volume of attendees is not light at the MPO engagement party. It's anywhere from 400 to 750 RSVPs. So it's not a small party by any stretch. And being able to facilitate it mobily has been a huge increase. And having, over the course of 5 years of this party, I think it was only the last 2 years that we actually had easy mobile accessibility, and it's made a big difference.
Thanks, Rob. And a follow-up question here. A couple of people are asking about Click and Pledge and whether whether they have mobile capacity, if Salesforce1 integrates with click and pledge events.
You know, Click and Pledge, I know, is working on a mobile-friendly environment. This is something that's likely going to be out. They are very good about responding to the community, and I believe they actually have something in beta that they're going to be releasing soon. Callista, you might have a little more information on that. If not, we can most certainly direct you to Click and Pledge.
Sure, sure.
Direct.
I was just going to comment that I don't know that it's out of the box today, and I would echo Rob's sentiment that it's probably coming soon if it's not. But Click and Pledge objects are just custom Salesforce objects, and so it would not be difficult to build a Salesforce mobile or a Salesforce1 app that would access those objects. It's just the same way that you saw in the demo where we were building a custom app to access the tree location and the tree objects. So if you imagine, you've got your Click and Pledge event and you've got your registrations and your attendees, even if all you wanted to do was just see a list of attendees and mark who was coming, that would not be a terribly complex app to build if Click and Pledge didn't have that for you. In fact, with Salesforce1, you actually have access to those objects today. It's probably not optimized exactly the way that you would want it in an event, but those objects are available and accessible to you today through Salesforce1.
Super, thanks, Callista. So let's see. I'm interested now to get back a little bit towards the beginning of the talk. We were speaking to different use cases of Salesforce1, and maybe this is a question for you, Rob. How important is it for nonprofits to start using Salesforce1 immediately versus waiting a year from now? And a follow-up to that also, what should they be focused on first?
Well, I alluded to that earlier on. It's really essential that it's part of your overall marketing strategy. This is not a fad by any stretch. This is a market trend, and it's moving very quickly. The question is really, how soon can I get mobile engaged in our overall strategy? And there are some quick wins that you can make as an organization, not speaking directly to Salesforce1, but just simply your website and having your website CMS, which most open source websites now are mobile dynamic. And it simply is as easy as turning on that capacity. If you go to idealistconsulting.com, both on your laptop and your mobile device, you'll see that it adjusts accordingly. And these are easy wins. Now, as for Salesforce1, we have noticed internally, for example, that hardware is shifting not away from a laptop to more of a template environment. So, for example, we have the computers we have at our desks sit in a cradle, but they are essentially templates. And that trend is likely to continue. In other words, we're going to be moving away further and further from a desktop environment over into an environment where you can just pick up your slate and carry it with you home quite easily, almost like a clipboard. The other part about this that's really essential, and if there was one immediate, and I can't emphasize this enough, your online donations need to be accessible through a mobile environment. And that might be leveraging Salesforce1 in conjunction with Click and Pledge or iApps or one of your existing CRM applications, whether it be Round Corner or CauseView or the like. But there is an entire generation of people now that are accessing all their data through their phone. And if they're going to give a donation, they need to see it in a format that's easy to do. They don't want to see your website being crunched onto a screen that is roughly 2 by 3 inches in size. So these are the places where Salesforce1, I think, is going to have its immediate impact. And fundraising and this is specifically in nonprofits, obviously. In other categories, it's maybe not as much so. So yeah, fundraising is probably the biggest, the most immediate use.
Super. And then let's see, another question about just kind of getting back to basics here. What is the difference between Salesforce Mobile and Salesforce1? And maybe Callista, if you want to address that.
Sure. Salesforce Mobile is the old mobile platform that Salesforce had prior to releasing Salesforce1. It was slightly different in terms of its functionality. It was more limited in terms of the records that you could access, and the data was actually kind of downloaded to your phone, and then you could only, it was complex in terms of which records you could have visibility on. It was also a per license product, so you had to pay for licenses, or you could sometimes get them comped and free. Salesforce1 replaces Salesforce Mobile entirely. So if you had Salesforce Mobile licenses, they're converted over to Salesforce1. So it's a real shift in Salesforce.com's direction in terms of allowing access to mobile. Before it was like you had to kind of opt in. Now I wouldn't even say it's really an opt-out model. There really isn't an option to opt out. Salesforce1 is enabled by default in all organizations post Dreamforce 2013. You can choose to, if you really don't want your users to access your Salesforce organization via Salesforce1 and you want them to use just the standard desktop type interface, even if they're on a mobile device, you can choose to turn off Salesforce1 so that you actually get that the desktop style interface even on mobile. But there really isn't any way to turn it off. It's there, and because people, as Rob said, people are moving to mobile devices. It's sort of, if you're not using a mobile device, or if you're not allowing access to your mobile devices, you're really kind of limiting the usage of your CRM.
I'd also like to speak just briefly to what that really means in technical terms of mobile versus Salesforce1. And I'm going to use sort of a technical metaphor so people can wrap their heads around it. Salesforce Mobile was more, if you wanted to manipulate it, you really had to be engaged more deeply with code. Salesforce1 has done for mobile what the CMS did for HTML code. It's that kind of transition. So it makes it a lot easier for folks that maybe aren't technically savvy out of the gate to be able to launch a mobile experience without huge amounts of coding background.
Great, thank you, Rob and Callista both. So I know everyone's time is really valuable, so we are likely to wrap this up pretty soon here, and I'm going to show a few final resources before we do that. And feel free to send more questions if you still have any questions through the sidebar there while I'm showing these resources. So let's see. So first of all, our website, of course. We do mobile deployments, as we have spoken to today, and you can see front and center here on our website is information about how we work with mobile. So please contact us anytime if you would like to hear more about that, and even just what it means for kind of getting started into that with your organization. I know it's a steep hill to climb sometimes, but we are happy to have that conversation. And case study, this is where you can read more about the Sacramento Tree Foundation project. So we wrote this up recently and just go over the problems and solutions that were part of this project. So again, we will be sending the recording and slide deck after this presentation, but you can read this on our website anytime as well. and the Power of Us Hub. So Rob alluded to this, and I want to just show you guys real quickly how to get to the Salesforce1 group. So if anyone hasn't been on this before, the Power of Us Hub is a really great resource for the nonprofit Salesforce community. It's an online community that was started back in July, I think, where nonprofit Salesforce members can share ideas, get support, and collaborate. And you can use your existing Salesforce login to access this. So I'll just do this real quick here. And bear with me for a second here. There we go. And there's a new global search, actually. So this is exciting. You can find things a lot more easily than you used to be able to. So you can type in Salesforce1 up here, and you can look for all posts that mention it, or you can look for this specific group. There we go. So you can see this group here is a place where people ask any kind of questions that they have about Salesforce1. And it's a lot of posts from Salesforce directly right now, as well as users who are just starting to dig into this. So, so please join the group. You can see many of us over here, and people monitor this on a daily basis. So it's a really great resource. And then the final thing that I wanted to call out, we already showed you, is the Salesforce1 Ready on the AppExchange link. So again, this is where you can see all of the apps that have been developed specifically for Salesforce1 to date. And this will be added to undoubtedly in the coming months. Okay, so with that, I think we are going to wrap it up for today. Any parting words, Rob or Callista, or Colleen for that matter?
No, just thank you for everyone attending. This was a really fun project, and it was a lot of fun to actually show it off. It's been a pleasure working in mobile. We're really excited about doing more projects similar to this.
All right. Thanks, and thank everyone so much for joining today. Again, we'll be sending out the recording after this is complete today, and you can share it with your colleagues. So thanks again. Bye.